afternoon. It would be good to have a little sound, and now we're good. Okay, and we're framing things up as we go here. Hi, everybody. Welcome to Cannabis Chat, which is what we've been using as a working title for our live streams on our new Twitch channel that is now shared on all the Pro Cannabis Media social media sites. I'm Jimmy Young. I'm the founder of Pro Cannabis Media, and I'm joined by my good friend David Rabinovitz. And how are you, David?
I'm happy to be here once again.
It's 2 Fridays in a row, so you are now getting the gold star as the most active guest in our new...
In the past 2 weeks.
In the past 2 weeks.
Is this like Saturday Night Live where I get the 5-time smoking jacket?
Absolutely. We'll have a green jacket for you if you'd like. You know, obviously cannabis color. David is the new treasurer of MASSCANN.
No, I wouldn't say new. I've been treasurer for a while, but sure.
It's new to me and new to you, my audience friends, that he's the treasurer of MASSCANN, which is the normal chapter in Massachusetts.
No.
Not anymore.
Not anymore. We're not the chapter.
It's a good thing that David and I are such good friends that we talk so much. Tell me what's going on.
Oh, with MASSCANN?
Yeah. Let's start there anyway.
So the big thing in Boston in marijuana in September is the third Saturday each September for the past 31 years.
Right. This is the 31st year of the Freedom Rally. That much I remember.
The Boston Freedom Rally takes place on the Boston Common. This year, it's virtual. So if you go to masscann.org, it'll be streamed all day tomorrow. They've got great panels, a lot of good guests. There'll be some music, some giveaways. It should be very interesting. We're asking everybody, participate virtually. Don't show up at the Common. And whatever you do, practice social distancing and be safe.
Especially when you're watching virtually, too. That's interesting to me because it is also coincides with the Jewish New Year this Saturday,
yes,
right?
It does.
Okay, so it's a good thing that there wasn't that conflict for all my fellow tribesmen of what to do. Should I be in Shul or should I be at the Freedom Rally celebrating cannabis on the Common? And by the way, there is a video out there of an appearance I made at the Freedom Rally a few years back. It's out there in YouTube land, but I'm not going to give a plug to it just yet. But I did lose my dabbing virginity at the Freedom Rally a few years back, let's just say.
Good.
Just thought I'd throw that out there. So this is what we do for the next couple hours. Actually, we're going to have a shortened version. We're going to have a Rosh Hashanah version of this chat. David's going to be with us for an hour, and we're going to talk about all things having to do with finances, sales. He's involved with a company called Cannabis. How'd I do? Did I get that one right?
Yep.
1 out of 2. I'll take the 500 batting average. It gets me in the Hall of Fame every year. Then we'll get to some news items. At 4:20, we always take a break at 4:20. Now, I'm going to ask David, because I don't know if I asked you this a lot. Did you know Jonathan Edwards? Ever heard of Jonathan Edwards, the singer?
No, but okay. I know the song.
You know the song Shanty. Do you know the song Sunshine Go Away Today? Don't feel much like that. That was his best hit. That was his, I don't think it was a #1 hit, but it was certainly a very popular song. The cult song, though, is Shanty. And we'll hear Jonathan Edwards perform it on tape, courtesy of our friends up in New Hampshire, that radio station that he made an appearance at. And we are showing it every 4:20 on these live streams that Pro Cannabis Media is now producing on a Monday, Wednesday, and Friday basis, 4 p.m. to 6 p.m. I'll be in studio. We have different guests coming in. It is evolving into financial information and laws and issues for Friday that we're kind of working with the title, The Green Rush. Mondays will be Medicinal Mondays, where we will be talking about cannabinoid medicine, using the cannabis plant as a medicinal plant, because that's really what God put it on the earth to do. And then on Wednesdays, we are going to have Professor Weed Wednesdays, where we're talking to educators about cannabis from all over the country. Various academic institutions now have embraced the cannabis culture to the point where they're creating curriculum and a course of study. Did you ever think that you'd see? I never thought in a million years that I'd see that day, David, let alone make it legal in my home state. But where you can study botanical medicine and having cannabis as the plant.
Here's how much it's progressed. There's a college down in New Jersey, and it's not legal down there yet.
And
they're already launching courses.
Stockton University? Because that's where Rob Mahee is a professor who I interviewed a couple weeks ago. And he teaches it down there. And I want to say Everlasting Garden is his website, but Rob Mejia, Mejia, Stockton University, New Jersey, will get you to Rob and find out more about his curriculum there. The other thing that we do at the top of every show is we kind of look at the news of the week or the news of the day, because as a live streamed program, it is up to the minute at 4:07-ish on the East Coast time. And we always release our Weed Talk News on Fridays. Weed Talk News is a weekly video that is produced by Pro Cannabis Media in conjunction with the founder of Cannabis.net. His name is Kurt Dalton, and he and I get together on Thursday nights and we talk about the news items of the week regarding the cannabis industry, and then we release it at noon on our various social media platforms, and we will also be playing it again following this live stream on the twitch.tv/Pro Cannabis Media channel. You know, do you remember the day when it was channels 4, 5, and 7? Just saying.
2, 4, 5, and 7.
2, 4, 5, and 7, that's right. Mm-hmm. And channel 2, which was public broadcasting, used to carry soccer games from local colleges. And back when I was growing up, it was like the only time you got to see really live soccer on TV. You know, so that was courtesy of public television. But now we've got the billion channel universe, thanks to the internet. Everybody can have their own channel and their own shows and their own talk shows. So we have evolved quite a bit as a technological society with all this stuff going on. Let's talk about some of the news items today. First of all, the biggest story, and we did talk about this in We Talk News, is the U.S. House of Representatives was all set to vote on the MORE Act, which would have legalized cannabis, at least according to the House of Representatives. But as we know, there are a few other branches of the government that could get in the way of that, including the Senate, because the Senate was not going to hear anything having to do with cannabis. In fact, the Senate has pretty much rejected anything that the Democrat-controlled House of Representatives has presented to them lately. We have a stagnant government right now. They can't even get together and come up with another COVID-19 relief act. And that's just kind of pathetic, David, when we're in a democratic society and we can't even get our government to work properly. I'm just saying, that's how I feel. I don't know how you feel, but that's okay. So they've delayed the MORE Act. They aren't going to vote on that until after the election, which is, of course, probably the most historic election in American history, certainly in my lifetime of 63 years. Vermont has moved forward with their move toward getting open up retail stores. We talk about that on We Talk News. And here's an interesting item that I did not recognize and realize, but I can certainly understand it. Vape sales in the cannabis industry have now rebounded to where they were before the vape crisis from the fall of 2019. We had the vape crisis before we had the COVID-19 crisis. And interestingly enough, those vapes that are being sold now are pretty much being bought in dispensaries, not in gas stations. Please, if you are going to vape, make sure that you're using a product that is tested in it rather than someplace illegal, because there's still a lot of people out there that are making money off the cannabis industry, the legitimate cannabis industry. How frustrating is that, David? You work with people that are investing millions and millions of dollars into the cannabis industry, and what has happened because of the regulations is it's kind of spurred the illegal market. And I think that's something that people can't quite grasp. It's like, why is that happening when they know that you could get legal cannabis at dispensaries that's been tested? And
well, interestingly enough, Jimmy, you can buy product that's been lab tested, labeled, close to the legal requirements for labeling and that sort of thing on the unregulated market. Right? So everybody's up their game.
Right.
So
you can grow it at home and bring it to a lab to get tested.
Let's say you grow a whole bunch of it at home and you start to make edible products or whatever it is. You bring your your plant material to the
Yep.
lab, you get
Yep.
it tested, you do the extraction, you go through everything you have to do,
Right.
and then you make your products, you label them, generally in compliance with what would be legal, even though you may not have a legal brand name, and it gets sold in the unregulated market.
Right.
So there are benefits to, even on what people would call the black market, and I try to get away from calling it that.
The illegal market.
Right. But the unregulated market, unlicensed market, they've upped their game. Right? Where it was in the past, it's you get what you get. Now you got plenty of players that are lab testing it and labeling it, and they know they have to compete with the regulated stores.
Right. And also there's still plenty of illegality going on in the cannabis space too, that there are a lot of people out there that are selling it that aren't taking the time to get it tested. You
Yep.
know, they're just selling it. And a reminder, it is legal in Massachusetts, where this live stream is originating from, to grow 6 plants per adult per dwelling. So if you have 2 adults in your dwelling, in your house, it is legal to grow up to 12 plants. Now you could get plenty of weed out of 12 plants, including enough to sell on your own, gift to friends and family, or whatever. That's still a lot of weed, David, I just want to say. Just throwing it out there. That's a legal thing, right? Okay. So vape sales have rebounded. The MORE Act has been delayed. Vermont has passed it. And did you know that a new superfood, we're talking about actually growing cannabis, if you just take the leaves off the live cannabis plant and you put it in a juicer and you juice those leaves, there is now research that says that this has tremendous benefits to your endocannabinoid system and your system in general. It can boost your immune system. They do recommend, by the way, it would taste like crap, okay, to use carrot and weed juice. So I don't know if you'll ever see that at Stacy's Juice Bar or not, but you know, leaves from the plant. And it's not the first time I've actually read about this. I've talked to people at various conventions in the past couple of years, and a lot of people swear by it. So another way to use this cannabis plant as a benefit to you. So that's one. They're now introduced a new bill in Congress to actually move the FDA forward and get CBD allowed into as a dietary supplement. They're now an act in Congress because of the Farm Bill in 2018. Hemp's legal, but nobody has any regulations yet. And of course, the FDA and the DEA continue to feud over whose responsibility is it really to regulate this. And then you throw in the U.S. Department of Agriculture, and now you've got 3 federal entities all fighting over the responsibility to regulate hemp, which is 0.3% THC or under. It's just crazy to me how we haven't moved far enough in 2 years since the Farm Bill was passed in 2018. They're still fighting about whose jurisdiction is it to create the regulations. I guess that's just the nature of a democracy and federal government and bureaucracy and all that.
The wheels of government turn exceedingly slow.
Slow, exactly slow. They might be rusted. Those wheels, I think, are pretty rusted right now.
So what else do we have on that list?
I'm almost done. I did see a Michigan study that is concerning to me, that 19 to 22-year-olds in college, this was a study out of the University of Michigan, are actually youth use. They call them youths. I like it that you're old enough to vote and go into the Army, but you're still considered a youth when it comes to a research on cannabis consumption. I'm just saying, this is what I'm reading here. 43% usage is up in that 19 to 22-year-old category. And yeah, so that's what I read there on usage of cannabis. So that's the items for today.
Oh, let's throw another one in.
I knew you'd know one. Go ahead.
Well, this one I find fascinating, is the Marvin Washington suit is moving toward the Supreme Court.
Really? So that has nothing to do with Steve D'Angelo's amicus brief that was filed recently? Okay.
No, so this is Marvin Washington, if I recall, is a former football player.
Yes, he is a former football player.
And he sued the government, arguing that marijuana should not be on Schedule 1.
Right. Everybody's trying to do this now.
And it's moved through the courts, and eventually what happened is the court ruled, federal court ruled, look, you can't come into court because you haven't exhausted all your remedies, meaning go back and ask the DEA if they'll think about rescheduling it. But we know what the DEA does. They just don't answer until a judge says to them, if you don't answer within the next X number of months, we'll answer it for you. And that harkens back to the 1980s when a DEA administrative judge actually ruled that marijuana was safe and shouldn't be on the Controlled Substance Act. And that report, that judicial order got buried late December in the Bush administration.
That's right. That is good.
Bush won. Right?
I like that.
So
Bush
here's
won.
what's interesting.
HW.
Right. Here's what's interesting about the Marvin Washington suit. It had, and I only skimmed the article, but what they talked about it was unique because there were about 8 or 9 amicus briefs. An amicus brief is somebody who has an interest but is on the outside or has some knowledge about it. It's a friend of the court.
Right.
So they have argued to the court that in fact the federal government, by looking the other way, by having some of the programs, by not prosecuting, has admitted that it doesn't belong on Schedule 1.
Right.
And by their actions, it's unconstitutional to leave it on Schedule 1. It's unlikely that the court's going to give a decision as to whether they'll take up the case until early 2021, but who knows?
Yeah, and again, at least they're pushing everything forward. This is all part of the green rush. This is all part of the green wave that's moving towards legalization. I think we all know now which party is saying decriminalize it, and the other party saying leave it the way it is. Let's just leave it at that. Also coming up in about 15 minutes at the half hour, 4:30, we'll talk to Blake Mensing, who's one of the premier attorneys in cannabis in Massachusetts. Pretty sure was he involved with the actual writing of the law? The question, do you know? I'll ask him that.
You'll ask him that.
Yeah.
You'll ask him that. Blake is one of the best attorneys in the state, I believe, and we'll ask him. He won an award for being one of the top cannabis attorneys. Very well known. He's also a licensee.
Yep. Okay.
Yeah, very much an advocate.
Yep. Great. And he'll be joining us on the phone at 4:30. But now it's for 1930, which means we're going to explain real quick about 420. It all started with the Waldos, a group of high school kids in 1971. They used to meet at the Louis Pasteur statue in San Rafael, California, after school to catch a buzz. And that's how the whole 420 thing started. It's now a code for cannabis, and it also means it's time to take a break. Listen to Shanty, the song by Jonathan Edwards that was such a part of my upbringing when I was growing up, because in 1971, yes, that is the first year that I partake in the substance. So without any further ado, it's time to hang around the shanty.
Yeah, this is a tune that I wrote back in 19... I've forgotten. We had a saying in our old band, one of my first bands in 1966 or so. What are you going to do tonight? Oh, just, like every other night, just going to lay around the shanty and put a good buzz on. Gonna sit down in the kitchen, fix me something good to eat. Make my head a little high, make the whole day complete. Gonna lay around the shanty, oh mama, and put a good buzz on. Pass it to me, baby, pass it to me slow. We'll take time out to smile a little before you let her go. We're gonna lay around the shanty, oh mama, and put a good buzz on. You're on something. Go ahead. Godspeed, everybody. There's nothing to do and there's always room for more. Fill it, light it, shut up and close that door, baby. We're gonna lay around the shanty, mama, and put a good buzz on. Take it, okay. Prohibition never works, it's time to realize it. It grows in my backyard, it's time to legalize it. We're gonna lay around the shanty, mama, and put a good buzz on. I'm gonna sit down in my rented car. I'm gonna jam it into drive. Gonna head on out and play at WSCA with Sean. I'm glad I'm alive. We're gonna lay around the shanty, mama, and put a good buzz on every night and day. We're gonna lay around the shanty, mama, and put a good buzz on.
Nice. It's Friday. Thank God. Thank God Jonathan Edwards is joining us live in the WSCA studios.
That was WSCA Studios. That was obviously not live. It was once. It's on YouTube, and now we appreciate WSCA from New Hampshire and Jonathan Edwards for allowing us to play that here on Cannabis Chat / The Green Rush. Right? Isn't that what I call it? The Green Rush?
Whatever you'd like to call it.
And David Rabinovitz is with us. At 4:30, we'll talk to attorney Blake Mensing. And at 5 o'clock, we'll let David go home to his family. And we will move on with Rick LaNeve, who's with a company that he's created called Accounting Buds. And what do you think he does? He doesn't sit around and counting buds in his shanty. He's an accountant for the cannabis industry. And you talk about a challenge, right? Did you know that the IRS actually helped cannabis industry out a little bit by letting them know how they can pay their taxes with cash? And actually, Rick will explain that to us, how the heck they're doing that. But how important is that? And how difficult is it to be in the cannabis business, David, with all these regulations? You know, you've got investors that have put millions of dollars into these things. And how do you account for your sales? Because they're making sales. And in Illinois and in Colorado this past month, they set records for sales. 63 million in Illinois in 1 month. That's a new state that hasn't been around that long. And Colorado, 10 years, and they finally passed the 200 million per month in sales in Colorado. That's pretty amazing, yes?
2.4 billion, that is.
If you right, times 12. Is that what
Right.
you did? You see how good he is with numbers? You really are. You know that, right?
So
You're
I'm always,
fascinating.
I always want to know what is the annualized rate, right?
Okay.
And because that's important, right? You look at the size of a business, that's going to tell you a lot about it. How much revenue do they do a year? And if your business is growing like this and you catch it right here, well, your revenue is equal to this plus all the smaller numbers. If you want to know what it's going to look like guaranteed going forward, well, maybe not guaranteed, take that 1 month number and multiply it times 12, and you know the level that you're running at.
And
that's important.
It's important because valuation of your company, because companies are getting acquired and they're being, they're merging with other companies and then they're being acquired on a somewhat regular basis these days. Well, tell me, what do you mean? What does that mean? I know there's a lot of merger and acquisitions
there's
going
some
on.
going on. I don't know.
Yeah.
I wouldn't say there's a lot right now.
Okay.
I think that'll come around.
Okay.
When it's no longer illegal at the federal level, stand out of the way.
Right.
Because what people think of the big players in the market now, the real big players will come in.
Well, Curaleaf, right here in Massachusetts, is the #1 MSO, multi-state operator,
Yes.
in the cannabis space. And CEO Joe Lusardi, I think we can call him a friend of the show since he's been interviewed by us a couple of times. They've certainly acquired a lot of different dispensaries now, and they have hundreds across the country. Why is it that cannabis advocates see MSOs as a threat?
There's a lot of reasons.
So tell me why, because I think that's a good thing to talk about before Blake comes on in a few minutes.
So if you think about a balance, and the MSOs will argue that I'm wrong on this, but if you think about a balance, somebody who opens up a cannabis operation in their local community,
Yep.
they're known in the community, they don't want to screw up, they want to make money, but they're going to be more leaning to they also want to do good.
Okay.
You take a large operation that you can't see who the real owner is, and they're in another state, and they're worried about running 30, 40, 60, 80 stores in multiple jurisdictions. They're not going to have the same concern for the local community. Right?
But the operating agreement and the license is still held at the state level.
It's still held at the state level, but I'll give you an example, and I can't disclose
Who it is.
who this is.
Right, we understand.
So, fully integrated operator with 3 stores, and that's the limit in Massachusetts, is 3 stores.
Right.
They decide they want a 4th store, so they twist their name a little bit and they say, well, we're a new company,
Right.
and they apply in another community. And everything about their application says, we've got plenty of experience. How you got plenty of experience when it's your first store is amazing, but they keep pointing to the other company where they have 3 licenses.
Okay, keep going.
Right.
Yeah, no, this happens. I get it.
Oh, it
That's
happens
right.
a lot, right?
Right.
And then when they talk about their website is the other company, the established one.
Right.
So if they can pick up that 4th store, which I understand the town caught on and is not looking very favorably on the application, but if they pick up that 4th store, A, they shouldn't have 4 stores, it's illegal. B, they're going to be trying to circumvent the Cannabis Control Commission. But just like what happened in the news with that program called Varsity Blues, where a lot of people with a lot of money were paying extra to get their kids into schools, the kid may get in if they didn't deserve to be there. The kid who was at the bottom of the rung got kicked out.
Right.
In this case, if this particular operator had made it through, they would have potentially kicked out. They would have kicked out one of the other competitors, one of which is social equity and one's economic empowerment.
Interesting. Which that law in Massachusetts was designed to help, not hurt.
Right.
So you don't like it when but they're actually doing something illegal or around, right? They're trying to
don't
get
like that
around the law.
There's nothing wrong with trying to get around the law. Right?
Everybody,
as long as you're doing it within,
excuse me, the
within
cannabis
the law.
industry's been doing that for
That's
decades.
it.
I just
There's
want to say.
nothing- If you're in this business, you're trying to get around the federal law, right?
Right, right.
So you're trying to maneuver to say, yeah, I'm doing something you may not have intended, but I haven't broken the law. But when you're blatantly telling communities, this is our new company, and you're pointing to the old company, you're trying to get a 4th store, that's a different situation.
Do we get his voicemail? Okay. We'll
Hey,
keep-
sorry about that.
Oh, that's okay. Now we know that you're live though now, Blake. Okay. How are you?
I am well.
So you're on, as you know, with Jimmy Young. You and I have met a few times, I think, on the Cannabis Road, as they say. And of course, our mutual friend David Rabinovitz is in studio with us. And appreciate you joining us on a Friday afternoon.
My pleasure.
Hey,
There you go.
Blake, that's a beautiful new mailbox you have in front of your house.
Oh, thank you for noticing.
And if you had sent us a picture of it, David, we could have shown it, okay?
Well, he still has the old one laying down
Oh,
flat.
I see. Oh, I see.
That's how
in
you know.
progress. It's
Yes.
in progress.
No, the new one is up.
Blake, tell us a little bit about your career in cannabis, and I certainly know your reputation is pretty good considering you're in a cannabis space and you're an attorney. You know, those are 2 things that are not easy when you go to a cocktail party or whatever and you introduce yourself
Absolutely.
as, right?
Well, I'll confess, I personally don't like most attorneys, so I try not to be your run-of-the-mill attorney. So, yeah, I have been an enthusiast of the plant. Some might call me a stoner for 23 years. So in that time, obviously, I've done some other things. I got a law degree. I got a master's in global environmental policy. I got an advanced law degree in environmental law. And then through my legal career, I've done a whole host of things. Transactional real estate work, consumer protection litigation, municipal law, representing 7 towns throughout the Commonwealth as associate town counsel. And really, honestly and truly, I have not enjoyed being an attorney until I got to pick my clients and the subject matter. So now I exclusively represent cannabis businesses and can say I enjoy being an attorney now. Not always, it's still a job, and frankly the responsibilities that come with being an attorney, it's a lot to bear, but so far so good. My approach is, I'm obviously human. I'm inevitably going to make a mistake. The reason I'm not afraid of making a mistake is if I do, I will admit it, I will do my best to fix it, and I don't know what else anyone could ask of me. But it's been great.
That's fantastic. Quite a nice resume. Interesting that you embraced the stereotype right at the top of your description. You admitted you were a stoner. And
That's
I think
right.
that's an interesting thing for me because so many people think that is a negative. And, that is the prejudice and the stigma that still exists out there. You've been pretty damn successful for a stoner, Blake, okay?
Well, I think it's about like anything. If you're an adult, you have to compartmentalize. So I don't consume cannabis until my kids are asleep and my work is done for the day. I'm an all or nothing kind of guy. I've had people, during the day say, "Oh, hey, do you want a hit?" And I say, "No," because then that's all I'm going to do for the rest of the day, and I have too many things to do. So yeah, I mean, lots of people, especially in the community outreach meeting context, will say derogatory things, and I'm upfront with them as well. I say, okay, you want to judge me? Do you have 3 graduate degrees? Because if you don't, you can't call me lazy.
That's right. Good job, Blake. I don't have 3
graduate degrees. Wait a minute.
I don't have 1, just for the record, and I still embrace it. Okay, and I'm pretty much a similar user to you. It helps you sleep. It helps you relax. It takes a lot of edge off at the end of the day when you're off the clock, and you're obviously a parent too, so you understand and embrace that responsibility as well.
Absolutely. Yep. It's about just being a responsible consumer. So, if it was me having a highball glass of whiskey at night, no one would bat an eye, with a substance that could actually and does kill lots of people. Whereas, if I smoke a bowl at night, why would someone judge me for that? I don't go out and, do any violence or things that are ridiculous. I mostly just sit and watch dumb television.
There you go. And
we're not going to get into what shows he watches.
No, well, he can watch whatever he wants. Look, I'm still enraged about the show I watched last night involving my favorite basketball team, okay? I just want to say I take this opportunity once in a while. Oh, David's groaning because we're talking about sports, all right? I'm still extremely upset with the performance of the Celtics last night, and yet I understand why. So if people really want to talk sports, they know how to find me. But we're talking about cannabis now, so we're going to focus on that. And Blake, the biggest news here in Massachusetts, really, I think since opening day back in November 2018, is the fact that now delivery seems to be the best kind of license you can have to distribute cannabis. And it was driven, I believe, by the social equity movement in the state. Do you see that development as historic as opening day back in November 2018?
Definitely, and like you said, on the backs of social equity advocates and other advocates, the commission is poised to have a license type that actually functions. The way it was originally drafted, in essence, the delivery folks would be, couriers only. You have to be, in a contractual relationship with a brick and mortar retail. You buy it at their retail price and you charge a flat fee as a delivery. That is not a winning recipe to make money, and especially when you juxtapose that with the commission's stated rationale for this license type and the exclusivity period, to lower the barriers of entry for the people most harmed by the failed drug war. So it's no good to lower the barriers of entry if the end result of that is you go out of business in 6 months. So the revised regulations on delivery, make sense linguistically, policy-wise and legally now. So it's a true retail license in that, delivery folks with a license or an endorsement attached to a micro business or craft cooperative may, buy it wholesale, warehouse it, and distribute it. The prior model had you buying, picking up stuff at the retail store,
pick it up, not buy.
putting it in your car, and if you can't deliver that day, you have to bring it back to the retail store. So the logistics around that were just ludicrous, and the way the commission has treated this delivery-only retail license is just that. They've counted it against your rule of 3, which I heard you guys talking about a little bit, in terms of how many brick and mortar retails. So this way you could have 2 brick and mortar retails and 1 delivery-only retail license, and that would be your cap under the regulations. That was the same as before when they didn't have a truly functional retail. Instead it would be a courier license, and that was one of the comments I submitted to the commission. Hey, look, words matter here. If you call it a retail, treat it as against the 3. It has to function like a retail. So I'm very thankful that they listened to reason. I certainly can't take credit for getting them to make that decision, but I certainly was saying the same things that a lot of people were. Hey, if you really want to help this group of people, make it a license worth pursuing. So I am happy with that, and it's definitely a huge change.
In your opinion, Blake, and not a legal opinion, but in your opinion, you've been around, you've seen this movement grow to the point where we are right now. There's a lot of investment dough floating around still, getting involved with grow houses, getting involved with dispensaries, all these marijuana-related businesses that are out there. But nobody's making money, or are they? What part of the industry is really where you think has the biggest margin? And I know the gentleman to my left, David Rabinovitz, is a numbers cruncher. So I know he has an opinion on this as well. But I just want to hear what you think. Can you make money in the cannabis business?
So I am not a numbers guy, and certainly defer to David's superior brain on that front. My impression is that yes, people are making money, notwithstanding Internal Revenue Code Section 280E, which basically says you're naughty for making money with a controlled substance, but notwithstanding that, you still have to pay us taxes. So that means there are fewer deductions available because they're, again, considering cannabis businesses as naughty operators. But I think sort of right now today, it's probably pretty tough going for a standalone retailer to make too terribly much money. Certainly I think they do make some, or else they wouldn't all be propping up here. But what I think you'd have to do to ensure the maximum profits available under the tax code would be, to be a vertically integrated operator, meaning you grow, you manufacture, and you retail yourself. That way you're cutting out middlemen. Sort of fast forwarding a few years when federal prohibition goes away, my guess is that the manufacturing license in this state will be the most profitable. And the simple logic behind that is when your feedstock price goes down, and I think it inevitably will, if you can buy from someone growing, on 200,000 acres in Arizona or Colorado or California or something, and if you're turning it into some other product, it doesn't really matter what it looks like in the bag. You can, you're after the chemicals, not what it looks like. So, pounds in Massachusetts of frankly not that great weed right now at wholesale, it's like $3,800 to $4,800. That's a death knell for manufacturers if they don't have some of their own supply. The margins just get really low, especially when you look at the initial capital costs of those pieces of extraction equipment that most of the industry is using. So yeah, in the short term, I'd say cultivators are probably going to make the most because of the aforementioned retail, wholesale price, A little longer term, I think manufacturers stand to win that, the marathon there. And then, yeah, if you're a standalone retailer, do your best to negotiate with the wholesale prices. Just know that, you're getting the last link in that chain. That's has the fewest available deductions under the tax code. So you're paying a middleman and you're taking a big hit come tax time. So, but long story short, I think people are making money. It certainly appears that way from the outside in. And that's my hope as a proud holder of 3 provisional licenses myself. So we'll see.
Aha, gotcha. David is chomping at the bit to chime in on this, so I'm going to
Sure.
let him tell me a little. What, in your estimation, he's got 3 provisional licenses. What's the most valuable, and are they, some of these states that have these licenses, they almost have like an auction on some of these licenses.
So, Blake, can you share with us what the licenses are for?
Sure. I am a minority partner in an adult use retailer out in Holyoke, aptly named Holyoke Cannabis. It says where we are and what we sell, so I think that gets straight to the point. And then I started a separate company with my younger brother. We're called Coyote Cannabis Corporation, and we hold a Tier 1 cultivation provisional as well as a manufacturing provisional. So both entities I'm hoping to be open in the December-ish range. And yeah, so I'm sort of quasi-vertically integrated. My majority partner on the retail side has a separate entity with a grow that he's funding, and then I hope to supply some of Coyote's products to the store as well.
You mentioned Holyoke. Their mayor Alex Morse just lost a kind of contested opportunity to get to Congress, but in the meantime, he's done a great job of turning that city into the center of the cannabis universe in Massachusetts. Quite a few dispensaries, quite a few grows. I mean, this was a town that was almost a ghost town before Alex took over as a mayor, and he's turned it around using cannabis as a business vehicle. How does someone, if you have 10 other dispensaries in your city, Blake, how do you differentiate yours from others?
Sure. So, I think a lot of people come into cannabis, and really I think there's a lot of overthinking. The people who say, yeah, we want to make the next Apple Store or weed, I find that wholly uninspiring and frankly just, copycats. It's too generic. So I think that sort of style of store where it's modern and flashy, that kind of thing, I don't think that's really trying to, meet the market where it lies. Meaning, these people who are going to be your best customers are stoners. They don't want to feel like they need to be wearing, black tie to walk into your store. So, just not taking things so seriously, right now, there's not all that much competition because we have, 60 stores open in the state, a state of almost 7 million. So per store, they don't have to fight many battles. I think ultimately what's going to win is people who are just, it's like anything, be genuine, hire people who want to be there. Certainly in the retail context, not everyone's going to stay there forever, and I hope they wouldn't. But, there's a difference from going to some, sort of big multi-state operator, polished and, heavily market research store as opposed to, a smaller mom and pop that, they actually love the plant and they care. So, I've been in Caroline's Cannabis, which I think is probably physically the smallest store in the state, and they couldn't be nicer and couldn't be more knowledgeable. I've been to some of the bigger stores, and you ask them a simple question, and they bury their face in their tablets while they look it up on Leafly. It's like, well, that's not really very helpful. I could do that myself. Right. So yeah, I think authenticity is going to win, and really, I'm hoping as a consumer myself that the product quality comes up quite a bit. Mostly what's available today, in my estimation, is grown only for profit. User experience be damned, and a lot of sort of the bigger companies are focusing and highlighting on their THC percentage. That's like going to a liquor store and buying Everclear. Sure, it's going to get the job done, but I think you're missing the point. That's not the point of cannabis. There's so many other things, to aid in the experience, and yeah, if you just focus on that, it's just not the complete picture in my mind.
He mentioned Caroline, so I want to go back to Uxbridge for a second, which is where Caroline's is. By the way, their T-shirts say "Be kind," and it's so true. This is what they believe in. I've met Caroline and her husband, and they're great people. Wasn't Uxbridge in line to have like the first prototype for a social club for cannabis? And
how about the drive-through, right? Drive-through was in Uxbridge
too.
Isn't it correct? Isn't that?
Yep, there's a company called Ironstone Express. It's the only drive-through I'm aware of. It is in Uxbridge. So it's funny you mentioned Uxbridge. The two municipalities where my companies are Holyoke and Uxbridge, and that is absolutely not an accident. I would say Uxbridge is the top town in the state for cultivators and manufacturers, and I'd call Holyoke, 1B to Uxbridge's 1A. And the simple reason there for Uxbridge taking the title for me is it's a by right use. There's no special permit. So on day one, you're going to save at least 3 months and, gobsmacking amounts of money to do all these little drawings. You'll have to do them eventually, but it's hard as a startup to write a big check in the beginning when you're so far removed from actually opening. And then the other major sort of structural competitive advantage that Uxbridge offers, unlike every other municipality I've dealt with in this state, and it's a lot of them, because this is all I do, they take 1.75% as a community impact fee. The state statute allows up to 3%. Almost every other town in the state ignores those words up to, and they say, yeah, 3% or hit the highway, pal. So not only does Uxbridge put a lower number there, they also cap it at $150,000 a year, meaning, and David, you can check my math, but if my company makes $8.599 million, we pay $150,000. If we, blow it out of the park and we make $85.99 million, we pay the same $150,000. So again, day one, we have a structural competitive advantage over every non-Uxbridge cultivator and manufacturer. Everyone else is paying 3%, forever.
Right. That's cool. And of course, Uxbridge is right next to the tiny town of Mendon, and I think it's actually a little bit bigger than Mendon, isn't it? I think. I'm talking about population.
I am geographically and demographically challenged, so
okay,
I have no idea how many is in either one.
That's fair enough. Will we see social clubs in Massachusetts? Obviously, with COVID-19, that has changed completely. No one's too motivated to open up a cannabis social club right now. But will we ever see that day happening? Maybe, 2 years from now, 3 years from now? When do you think that might happen?
We will see it, I think. This sort of goes back to my days as a municipal attorney, so this is why I know what I'm about to say. So obviously the regulations under the commission allow for it. What they've done that's a little bit different than basically every other way they interact with municipalities is they've allegedly, I haven't seen the form yet, I've asked for it, they don't have it yet, but there's a form they'll send to the town and say, hey town, are you okay with a social consumption lounge within your borders? So that's sort of the exact opposite of the mechanisms in place to ban this industry from town. So in my mind, and truthfully, I may end up suing my town because we have no adult use retail brick and mortar allowed. And under the state's regulations, that means I, as a private individual, can't have adult use cannabis delivered to my home, though as a patient I could. So there's all sorts of issues there. It's my property. It's a state right. Why should I have someone unilaterally say that I can't have something delivered to my house, especially when the regulations require that the delivery vehicle, be anonymous? What's the difference between that delivery and the gazillion other deliveries I get? It literally has no impact on anyone else. So I will be fighting that if they get in my way, and that'll be sort of something I do on the side. But yeah, long story short, the reason social consumption is far away is the Secretary of the Commonwealth, William Galvin, said, yes, the statute under the cannabis law says, there's a mechanism to have a vote for a town to opt in for social consumption. That pathway, that voting mechanism, isn't enshrined anywhere in any other state election law. So what that means is we're now at the mercy of sort of an unknowable legislative clock. And I operate under the assumption that law is complicated enough once it's on the books. I don't spend too terribly much time trying to read political tea leaves because frankly I don't like politicians, because they always say one thing and do another, and I just find that to be gross. And unfortunately I have a terrible poker face, so I'm not good at schmoozing politicians. If someone's saying something nonsensical around me, my face will tell it. So anyway, I'd be a terrible diplomat, but a good attorney. So anyway, I think we're a couple years off because we have to rely on the legislature, and I have no idea when they'll act, or I think they will because the political will from the populace is there, but I have no idea when they'll actually do the fix that's required.
Right. And right now with COVID, I'm not even dining inside yet for the most part. So, and I think that's true for a lot of people. They've extended the outdoor dining, I believe, until December in Massachusetts, which I think is going to be wild. I will admit, though,
people talking about bringing blankets to restaurants.
Right, and
that's going to be an interesting time.
It's like tailgating, but it's like tailgating in a football game. I can understand if you're prepared for it.
Yeah, but at a football game, people are tailgating are also
buzzed,
right,
with all sorts of things on them, right? That's how that works. So, anyway, hey, Blake Mensing, I just want to thank you for talking with us. As always, I've enjoyed your company, your counsel, your perspective. And I also want to give David over here credit for lining you up. So I really appreciate that. Plus, David has, as you know, is a numbers guy, and he's prepared about a 4-page PowerPoint to go over the latest figures and the trends in sales of cannabis in the Commonwealth. And I don't want to deny him the opportunity to talk about that, because I know you love numbers.
I think numbers tell the story. But let me throw something else out. So in addition to Holyoke and Uxbridge, for anybody who's out there looking for space, there is a new cannabis park that's being constructed down in Middleborough. I was down there yesterday morning, and this place is very exciting. They look like they know what they're doing. They got a lot of tenants coming in. I think they're going to have 6 buildings in the first 2 phases, and it may go to more buildings after that. And I actually believe those are the best places if you're going to situate a business, because no matter what you do, if you grow, you need to have somebody who's going to do some processing or testing and some transportation. And when you put a bunch of businesses together, I think it helps all of them.
Okay. So, and when you say cannabis park, what's going to be there?
It is large industrial, brand new large industrial buildings, about 20,000, I shouldn't say large, 20,000 square foot industrial buildings that they're dividing up for various tenants. They've got probably about 4 or 5 cultivators down there, 3 or 4 product manufacturers. I think there's 3 transportation companies. I think there's 2 prospective home delivery companies. Quite a few businesses going in there.
There we go. Yep. All right. Did we say, is Blake still with us?
Indeed.
All right. Well, again, thank you. Let's keep in touch. My studio is your studio.
You want to keep Blake on while we go through the numbers?
Do you want to hang through David's numbers presentation? That's it. Yeah. Okay. Do that. All right. So we're gonna
talk a little bit about what's going on
in
the state of Massachusetts with respect to licensing.
Yes, please, and take us through the numbers and walk us through this. And I know Dan French, our director, is juggling both Zoom and PowerPoint and Twitch live streams. And I marvel at stuff like this when he pulls this off. And exactly what he's doing now is lining up the screens so that we can share what's in your hand with those who are watching us on the live stream. And I'll tell you, thank God for young people. That's all I got to say. All right?
Yep.
He's putting it into the presenter mode now. I mean, we'll get there. We'll get there. This is called filling, tap dancing.
You're very good at that, Jim.
Well, you know what? The mouth that roared. What can I tell you? Hey, we got it. All right.
All right.
And look, I noticed you put up Weed Chat. That's going to change to the Green Rush, but then we're going to let that go. Go ahead.
We are. So let's look at what the state of licensing is. And this goes back to, this is the most current data out of the Cannabis Control Commission, September 10th, so it's not that old.
It's a week old.
Right. There's 883 applicants somewhere or another within the queue.
Okay. And you list all those types of licenses on the left.
All the licenses are listed on the left, and how they're progressing through is listed at the top. But I'll tell you, here's what is fascinating. If you take a look at the line that has the marijuana cultivators, you'll see there's a total of 250 cultivation licenses that have come into the commission.
Yep.
There you go. Dan just found it on the screen for us.
Yeah.
35 have commenced operations.
Yep.
Right?
Okay.
Or have been authorized to commence operations. Now, right behind them are 14 applicants with final licenses that are looking for their certificate to commence operations. But what I find most fascinating is take a look at what's behind that. 140 provisional licenses. So let's ignore those 14 people with final licenses and just look at commence operations and provisional license. Now, a cultivator from provisional license to commence operations probably takes the longest amount of time because they got the most build out, most complex facility, most amount of construction.
Most overhead too,
right.
I'm sure.
But think about this. Let's assume that all 35 of those licensees are operational.
Mm-hmm.
Massachusetts has the highest price of weed in the country. That's because supply and demand are out of balance. As more cultivators come online, there'll be more supply.
Got it.
But take a look at 140, that's 4 times the current number that have been authorized to commence operations. By next May, next June, I would expect most of those 140 are going to be with the commence operations.
Are they
So
limiting the amount of licenses, those provisional licenses for cultivators? Is there a limit on it? Or is it going to be
Absolutely
market dictated?
Don't know.
Okay.
Right. Hopefully the cannabis.
There's no state limit.
Right. There
Thank you.
isn't a state limit.
Thank you, Blake.
The only mechanism for a limit is if you don't, and Blake, correct me if I'm wrong on these numbers, if you sell less than, I think it's 85% of your production,
Yeah.
then they're going to lower your tier class, so
Right.
you
That was-
can't have as much canopy.
That was the
So
relegation.
it's 85% or more to move up. They do what's called relegation. If you sell 70% or less of your tier's harvest for the preceding 6 months, they'll bump you down.
Right.
Now,
So,
I got a little anecdote for that. Can I throw an anecdote?
Throw
in?
your anecdote
I
in.
was at the Cannabis Control Commission meeting when Steve Hoffman suggested the relegation and made the analogy to the English Premier League in soccer, where if you don't win as many points, the last 4 teams get relegated to the bottom division, and then the top 4 move up to the top division. And I got so excited that they were actually talking about 2 of my favorite things, soccer and weed, in my home state. I was just blown away by it, and Hoffman, I know, will remember how excited I was. But I digress, as usual. Let you continue with your thing here. And I know that our 5 o'clock guy, Rick LaNeve, is on hold, or he's on deck. He knows what's going on. So we're going to extend this a little bit. I know you need to run out of here too, but so it's kind of in your hands now.
Right.
David.
So if we're going to write down predictions, right? My first prediction is by next May, we're going to see the amount of product quadruple or quintuple. There's going to be 4 to 5 times as much product available in Massachusetts by next May or June as compared to today.
And a subsequent drop in price for that?
No, because there's going to be a lot more retail stores too. But the price compression will come.
Okay.
Now here's another interesting one. Take a look at the number of marijuana retailers. Now I think Blake talked about how 60 stores are open, 75 have commenced operation certificates. That means that those other 15 stores, and it could be a little bit more than 60 at this point, but those other stores are going to open soon. I would expect within the next 45 days, because from the time you get your commence operation certificate, you typically open within a number of days, not necessarily weeks.
Right.
So let's assume there's 75 stores open. Take a look at how many provisional licenses are behind it.
Right.
There's 183 provisional licenses behind those 75 stores. Add in even the final, it gets up to about 194. You're talking about 2.5 additional stores for every store that's open now.
Wow.
I'll make that prediction that we're going to be to that point by probably March or April.
Wow.
Right?
Yeah.
So you're going to where it's hard to find a store in many communities.
Yep.
By next April,
Except for Holyoke.
by next April, there's going to be better than 250 stores open.
Wow. That's incredible.
Which means we're going to need the extra supply to supply them.
Got it.
And I'm going to predict that about half the industry is going to be integrated, meaning what Blake was suggesting about the operation that he's a partner in. They grow it, they process it, they retail it. And then there's going to be another half of the industry where people grow it, but they don't own retail, and there are retailers that don't own their own grows. That's going to be what's really going to help the ecosystem, because when you're fully integrated, you're kind of doing your own thing.
Right.
When you're not fully integrated, that's when you've got a lot of commerce going on, as people are buying and selling and servicing the business.
This is one of the reasons why I love the cannabis industry, Blake, and you can understand, you can relate to this too, I think. There's law, there's economics, supply and demand, there's botany with the science of the grow of the plant, there's chemistry. There's so many elements that touch this plant now.
Absolutely, and it's every standard business obligation and duty, then this whole extra heaping pile of stuff because people are scared of the plant. So yeah, I think the portability of one's skills into this industry is really cool. When I went to law school, I didn't know that cannabis law was a thing. I just consumed it. So, to have that sort of benefit of my resume to be useful to folks now, I couldn't have scripted it any better. So yes, I share that. It's very cool.
That's
Great. So one more observation on this. We'll go to the next slide where I'll make a quick observation, and we'll get to the last one.
Okay.
So take a look at the bottom of the commence operations column, and you'll see 149 licensees have been authorized to commence operations.
Yep.
Look at the number of provisional licenses that are out there, 456. So we're going to take, the industry is going to quadruple in size.
Wow.
In less than a year. But what's really fascinating is look at the number of submitted applications. Cannabis Control Commission has now gotten to the point where there's more provisional licenses than submitted applications. And they're now processing the applications at a pretty good pace. I've assisted people with the home delivery application, the pre-certification. One team submitted, and within 2 days they had their RFI back. This weekend they're going to address the RFI, and I bet by the end of next week.
Request for information?
Request for information.
Thank you. That's
right?
what I'm here for.
So their whole, if you count it by business days, they will have submitted, and within less than 10 days they're going to be pre-certified for home delivery. That means the Cannabis Control Commission is starting to get their act together on processing applications.
Gotcha.
So Dan, can we flip to the next slide real quick?
Look at that.
Now this one
This
here.
one's got colors. I like
Yeah, this
one.
one's got colors. All this really is the last slide with the information from August and July in there.
I see.
And if you look at the far right, well, I'll point out two things that I think are interesting. If you look at the far right, where it says totals, if we can scroll over there, Dan,
Oh,
you look in July, there were 833 total applications.
He's got it.
By August, another 21,
Yep.
up to 854, and this month, another 29. So on average, we're bringing in about 25 new applications a month. But if you watch the Cannabis Control Commission meetings, the approvals are exceeding 25, which means a year ago, they were approving less than the number of new applications. They couldn't keep up with the pile. Now they're whittling the pile down. And I think we're going to, now that that's happened, that we've gotten over that hump, I think you're going to see the industry start to grow and build out very, very quickly.
There you go.
If you look at the home delivery, for those of you who are in the social equity program, because I invited them all onto to listen to the show.
Yeah. And thank you for that.
Yep. Notice that 35 operators have filed for pre-certification, have been pre-certified and approved. 6 of those already have their applications in.
Uh-huh.
And I expect that once they get all the new regulations in place, that'll move forward quickly.
All right. And the last slide, big finish.
Well, second to last, but this
sorry.
this will be a big finish. So this just gives everybody a feel for what's going on with canopy in the state. So if you take a look, you'll see that we've got about, depends on who you talk to, but you'll hear that we need about 8 to 11 million square feet of canopy.
Okay.
What's presently licensed with provisional and final licenses, midpoint's about 4.4 million.
Oh, wow.
So we still got a ways to go, but that's a lot of space.
Right.
But when you now there's a slide that I didn't include in here. 1/3 of that is actually final license, and probably 2/3 is provisional.
Gotcha.
Which is why, even though it looks like there's 4.4 million, that includes the provisional. If you look at the number of pending applications and you add that in and assume it's going to be the same average canopy size, we're probably about 5.8 million square feet of canopy. While it may seem a little boring on some of these numbers, if you're looking to be in the business, that's important. These numbers are going to tell you where the industry's going and when to expect some price compression and help you do some business planning.
And Blake, these are called metrics, right?
They can be.
Indeed. Although I'll confess, spreadsheets make me feel very stupid in a hurry. So I rely on folks whose brains work that way.
Great.
But
Hey, Blake Mensing, thanks so much. I hope we get you in studio sometime. You're always welcome here in Wellesley, and appreciate you doing what
My
you
pleasure.
do for the cannabis cause, as it were.
my pleasure. Well, I hope you both have a great weekend, and I appreciate the chance to appear. So
All right.
looking forward to coming on again sometime. Thanks a lot.
There's Blake Mensing. David Rabinovitz, as usual, numbers fascinate you, and you do a great job of telling the story. You use your numbers to tell the story.
Well, thank you.
And I use audio and video and my voice and anecdotes to try to make it somewhat entertaining and interesting. So this is what we're going to do. Dan, I know you. This is going to throw you a little bit of a curve, but I think you'll like this. Do you have a Cannabis.net video ready to go? Awesome. Let's go to the Cannabis.net educational videos that we have that we use part of this program. And then when we come back, we're going to go to Rick LaNeve, who's standing by in our green room on Zoom, and we'll get to that after this. Don't go away. Cannabis Chat continues. Cool. All right, you're clear, Mr. Rabinovitz.
Thank
Make sure
you.
you clip your mic before you leave.
I will.
As usual, it was terrific. Man, I tell you, the show flies when you're on it because we talk, and we talk at a level I think that's really good. Let me ask our audience, Isabel, how we doing? All right, hi everybody, welcome back to Cannabis Chat and also the Green Rush. That was David Rabinovitz and Blake Mensing on the phone. We talked a lot about numbers and business, and who better to go from those kinds of numbers than to a CPA, a certified public accountant, who actually wants the cannabis business and wants to have access to those kinds of numbers so he can help you who happen to be in the cannabis business. We have Rick LaNeve on Zoom with us, and let's check out, let's say hello. Hi, Rick. And hold on. Hello, Rick, say hello. Okay, we're learning by doing, right? Rick, you got to say hello so we know if there's actually volume coming through.
Yeah, can you hear me? Hello?
Oh, we got you. All right. Yes, we do. Terrific. Okay. How are you?
Good. How are you?
Good. I don't know if you were able to actually listen or watch the last 20. Okay. I actually see you shaking your head. So I know that means no, which is okay. But what David Rabinovitz does is he looks at all the public data that the Cannabis Control Commission in Massachusetts puts out on their website. And then he does his metric projections, and he looks at the market so that you can understand the supply, demand, the potential, and all that. And that's stuff that goes right over. It's like talking chemistry and science to me. But anyway, tell us about yourself and tell us about Accountabuds, will you?
Sure. So Accounting Buds is a newly formed entity. I formed it in January of this year to focus on the cannabis industry and the needs of the cannabis industry, specifically with regards to accounting, outsourced CFO, and just strategic advisory type of work. I've been doing that type of work under another banner for a few years, and I realized that after attending one or two cannabis-related networking events that the cannabis space really could use these types of services, so I started Accounting Buds.
There you go. And you are part of our team here. We want to let everybody know that you are part of our team, and I appreciate that. How challenging is it when you're dealing with a cash-only business? Because as you know, a federal illegal substance, anybody in the cannabis business, including pro-cannabis media, you can't bank officially. You've got to find banks that are offering high service rates to be able to actually have your money in it. But you have a lot of credit unions that are involved as well. So how challenging is it to actually find the right accounting? Because every dispensary, though, has to account for every sale, right? Because they have to report it to the state.
So one of the challenges is that the business is a cash business. So as accountants, we love to reconcile numbers to make sure they're correct. And one of the main processes you do is you reconcile the numbers that you have reported in your store or your own business against what's flowing through the bank. That's the easiest way to reconcile and make sure you've picked up every transaction. In the cash business, that's much more difficult to do. Now, on the flip side of that, a lot of the different states have their own systems in place for dispensaries and other type of cannabis businesses that have to be used to track inventory because it's a controlled substance. So we could use those systems to reconcile against as well and to pull some of the data that we need.
All right. Hey, this is the first, Rick, you're part of Pro Cannabis Media history right now. I just want you to know that, all right?
Okay.
Because we've attempted to do a Zoom call for the first time, and a lot of people know how Zoom works. But what we're learning as we go along here with our live stream software, exactly the capabilities, because you always want to push the envelope. So thank you for being our guinea pig, if you will.
There we go.
Hey, wait, but you know what? Lean out of the shot a little bit so we can see your logo.
Leaning the wrong way.
We want to see the logo. There it is, Accounting Buds. I like that. Now I got to ask you the question. You can come back in now and tell us who designed that for you, is that something you actually did?
So the name I came up with myself.
Okay.
I'm not the most creative person in the world as an accountant.
Yeah.
But over the course of about a week, I came up with a name. I double checked it to make sure that the website wasn't taken, and actually it was, but we were able to shorten it to acctbuds.com, and the website wasn't in use. So I came up with the name. The logo, I'm not nearly that creative. I had a couple ideas, but like I said before, I've started one or two businesses before, so I had those, and she came back with a couple different options. When I saw this one, it just immediately I said, that's the one we have to go with.
It's good. We like it. We like it. And it's funny, the color green, it's like it's in every marijuana related business. I have yet really to see one.
It's almost mandatory.
That's right. That's all right. But as a Celtics fan, I'm certainly partial to the color green. But let's go. Let's ask. I got to ask you this question because we talked about this briefly before. The IRS recently released guidelines to marijuana-related businesses on how to pay their taxes in cash. How do you do a major cash transaction without rolling up to the IRS in an armored car?
And that's basically what you have to do. The reason they came out with the guidance last week was twofold. One of them was just to remind companies that even though you are participating in what is a federally illegal business, you still have to pay taxes. And let's not forget, those rules were initially put in place, which is how they caught all the mobsters back in the day. The mobsters weren't paying taxes on all of their, illegal activities. So the first part of the guidance they put out was just a reminder that, hey, cannabis companies, you're still responsible to pay federal taxes. The second part of the guidance was, and they didn't really get overly specific on this point still, but it was basically how to pay taxes if you don't have a bank account. And what was happening before is some cannabis companies were pretty much driving up to their local IRS office with a car full of cash saying, we're ready to pay our taxes, but we don't have a bank account. And the local office had no idea how to deal with that. So basically what the guidance does now is they've listed out certain offices in different areas that are equipped to take cash transactions as payment of your taxes, which still technically is against a bunch of IRS rules because you're supposed to be able to file and pay everything electronically.
Right.
But the guidance is allowing it right now. So basically, rent an armored truck, roll up to one of those locations, call them ahead of time, tell them you're coming, and they'll have someone ready to count the cash.
That's just crazy. This is another reason why things have to change. Certainly, I don't think anything's going to happen. No change is going to happen before November 3rd, I can tell you that. And then hopefully, well, let me rephrase, we don't know what will happen, but if there is a change, the cannabis industry will be celebrating, especially those who want just to have access to the banking industry. That's all.
Absolutely. And I actually think either way, you're going to see more access to the banking industry. There's a couple things out there that banks are trying to form or skirting around some of the current rules. And I think there's just one or two tweaks that may happen soon, even without making it federally legal. I think I heard the other day there's a case in front of the Supreme Court that could potentially get marijuana taken off of Schedule 1.
Right.
Which would then open up the banking industry as well.
Right. And I never forget Steve D'Angelo, who's been doing such a great job with advocacy throughout his entire life, explaining to me in Jamaica when I interviewed him, because I asked him, I said, isn't it possible that the current POTUS could make a change a week before the election? And he said, yes. He said, all he really has to do is pick up the phone, call the DOJ. It's an administrative activity to just change it from Schedule 1 to Schedule 2, 3, 4, or just take it off the schedule. And I shudder to think of the impact that might have on the election if he decides to do that. And as we know, no one knows what this guy does on a daily basis. I'm sorry.
I think he decides on the fly sometimes.
That's right. That's right. Let's get back to the tax code for a second, because one of the biggest challenges, besides having to pay your taxes in cash, is the fact that this business, the cannabis industry business, cannot take deductions, normal business deductions, because it's a federally illegal substance. And how does a multi-state operator like Curaleaf pay their taxes? I still can't quite understand how this works.
So what you're referring to is 280E, which basically states that you can't take deductions for illegal businesses, even though you have to pay taxes on illegal businesses. And therefore, it makes almost everything except for completely and utterly purely cost of goods sold, not a deduction. And even the cost of goods sold is technically not a deduction, it's a reduction from your income, which is a little bit different in the tax code. But so that's what you're referring to there. But what companies do is there's a lot of different ways to, I won't say get around it, but to still reduce your taxes. So one of those is setting up multiple companies. So you keep your grow operations in one entity, and you keep your administrative operations in another entity.
Gotcha.
Because that entity is not plant touching.
Right.
A lot of companies go through and they're able to take normal deductions from that entity. And they'll go so far as to allocate square footage in different buildings they own to the different entities. So the grow section of the building will be in the grow entity, the bathrooms in that area will be part of the other entity because that gives them more square footage that they could deduct. They consider the bathrooms to be part of the administrative company, which has its own entity, and therefore they could deduct that as part of their taxes.
Gotcha.
So there's a lot of legal setups you could go through to kind of help a little bit.
So I guess this would be a hypothetical, and I hate asking hypothetical questions, and I'll never forget when one of my comrades asked Bill Parcells a hypothetical question, and he undressed him in front of the entire Boston media corps. If the Democrats get elected, if Joe Biden gets elected president,
Yep.
he's already on platform, on record, saying he wants to decriminalize it federally and open up the banks, okay?
Yep.
The laws still are state to state. So as an accountant, don't you have to know the laws on each state, whether it's a medical program or an adult use recreational program?
Yes and no.
Okay.
I actually just had this conversation with a potential client
Aha.
earlier today.
I hope you got him.
So-
I hope you landed that client.
They're pretty close, I think.
Okay, good.
But from a tax perspective, absolutely. From a booking perspective, just pure accounting, not as much. You need to understand the tax implications so that you can make sure you put things in the right accounts to make it easier for the tax preparer. But as from a pure debits and credits perspective, not as much.
Gotcha.
And I try to focus on the debits and credits side. I have people on my team that can come in or I subcontract to, depending on the state, because one person doesn't necessarily know every state on the tax side. But that's kind of the best way, from my perspective, to get a broader knowledge base pretty quickly.
Great. And, a fear of mine, whenever the federal government gets involved with this, it's pretty obvious if you just look at their track record, they constantly change the rules. You'll get a notice in the mail of a fine because you thought you did something right and you didn't, and then they put interest on top of that. I just shudder again to think that if we get to that point, will the federal government screw it up again, I guess?
Well, I guess one of the good things is, and this is one of the reasons why I was comfortable getting into this business itself, this industry, and we could maybe talk about that in a minute too. Mm-hmm. But both the current administration and Biden's administration have stated they're going to continue the policy of basically letting legal businesses if they're legal in the state, continue to operate and not go through and freeze funds. If you do have money in a credit union, come in and freeze your credit union access,
right?
That type of thing. So from that perspective, at least for the next 4 years, it seems like we're going to be continuing on with the current policies of, while it's federally illegal, we're not going to go through and prosecute or try to freeze funds.
Right.
And the other thing, I'm going a little off topic now, but when I started looking into this industry, there was a lot of peers of mine that were questioning whether I should actually come into this industry or not. And when I did the research, the AICPA and most of the state CPA associations had already all released guidance saying it's okay for CPAs to work with cannabis companies.
Gotcha.
There was quite a bit of questions about it in the beginning because as CPAs, we have ethics that we have to keep as well. And working with a federally illegal business potentially could violate those ethics. But since that guidance is out there as well, it increased my comfort level getting into the industry.
Gotcha. And let's talk about the comfort. Let's talk about the stigma. How has it been received? Have you run into any time where people will say, "Oh, you're in the cannabis industry. I'm not sure I can work with you"?
Absolutely. So, like I mentioned a second ago, some people that I know, when I was mentioning getting into the industry, were trying to caution me from getting into it at all. And I explained to them what I just explained to you about the AICPA, et cetera. And I said, in the two administrations, I said, you know what? The risk level for me is not as bad as it seems, and the opportunity is huge. But there still are people that don't like the stigma of the industry. So, for example, I won't get into names, but I was talking with a former colleague the other day about potentially, coming on board and helping me out and subcontracting with me. And it's actually someone that I had worked for previously. So, I basically called them up. We were talking in general and saying, look, for either of my two businesses that I had, because they both basically do the same thing, if there's something that comes up that I haven't experienced before, he's a few years old and has a little bit more experience.
Yeah.
Would you be willing to work with me? And on the non-cannabis industry, he said, absolutely. On the cannabis industry side, he said, I'm sorry, but I can't touch that industry. I've spent my entire career building up my reputation, and I can't have that, I forget his exact words, but like stigma that stain on my reputation.
Wow. It's too bad. I mean, again, New Jersey, of course, is a medical state. I think they just added another dispensary. I think they're up to 11 now in the whole state of New Jersey. And I know that it's on the ballot for November for adult use recreation. Then you throw in all these regulations. Everybody's looking for reasons to retard the growth of the industry even before it starts. And yet you still are getting millions and millions of dollars invested in cannabis on a regular basis as the engine continues to chug along, this green wave, this green rush that's going on in our country. And I just hope one day we'll get to the point where people will understand God put this plant on earth for a reason, and it's been used medicinally for thousands of years. The stat that I love to throw out at these naysayers and prohibitionists that I've learned is in the 1920s, before Prohibition, 1937, medical doctors in the United States wrote 3 million prescriptions for cannabis for people. And it, it's like, so in the 1920s, heck, you could get it. You could get a prescription for cannabis. But, as soon as they prohibited in 37, it was done, and it became that evil weed. And it had a lot to do with the fact that hemp was part of the equation. And the people behind Reefer Madness were in the pulp industry, Mr. Hearst and Mr. DuPont. And they were the money behind the production of Reefer Madness and the development of the DEA and Harry Anslinger, who was the first drug czar.
I actually had never known until I got involved in this industry and I don't know the exact year when it changed, but in our early days of the country, if you were a farmer, you were required to grow a certain percentage of your crop as hemp.
Right. And it would actually be really good for the environment to do that again. But you know what? We'll see what happens. We're in a historic time. Happy to be part of it. Happy you're part of our team, Rick. And I'm so
very
appreciate
happy to be part of it as well.
You've given us a shot here on Zoom. And as far as I can tell, it's worked okay. Now, again, we have to go back and look at the video and see how it was recorded and levels and stuff.
Yeah.
But I got to give Dan French, our studio director, a plug here because we don't know until we try it. So, Rick, thank you so much for being there. Look forward to working with you in the future.
Thanks for having me, Jimmy. Thank you.
All right, and there you go. That was Rick LaNeve from Accounting Buds, ACCTBUDS.com. That's where you find him. That's where you will find him. And, of course, you're going to find us here Mondays, Wednesdays, Fridays, 4 p.m. to 6 p.m. It looks like Mondays is going to be we're going to be talking about cannabis as a medicine. Wednesdays, we're going to educate you about the different ways you might be interested in getting into the cannabis business, what part of the cannabis business you might want to get into. And then on Fridays, we're going to talk numbers. We're going to talk finance. We're going to talk about investing in the cannabis space. So that's what's going to be coming up on Cannabis Chat, one of our new programs. We live stream it here in our Wellesley studio, and we want to thank you for watching this, and also please subscribe, like, and share. We are trying to grow this thing, and if you believe in what we're doing, giving a voice to the cannabis industry, please share it with your friends. Tell everybody you know about it that we're out here doing this. I've done 2.5 years of content on cannabis. I've interviewed some of the nicest people I've ever met. I've gone from interviewing some of the biggest names in sports like Pele and even the late Joe Paterno, and yes, all the Boston sports guys as well. Henry Aaron in the 1986 World Series at Fenway Park, still one of the biggest thrills of my life. And now I'm interviewing Bruce Linton and Joe Lusardi, the CEO of Curaleaf, and Steve D'Angelo, who's fighting the fight for getting every last prisoner project out of jail who's been convicted of a cannabis crime. And these are really passionate people for this cause. So join the cause, subscribe to us. So for Dan French and Isabel Turner, who helped me put this thing on almost every day, every week, stay tuned, because now we're going to have our Weed Talk News, the latest in the news industry from cannabis with Kurt Dalton, Cannabis.net. Remember, it's a whole new world of weed out there. Use it responsibly. Lashana Tova. Happy New Year to all my tribesmen. We'll see you next week.
We are Pro Cannabis Media.
Hi, everyone. Welcome to Weed Talk News. I'm Jimmy Young, the founder of Pro Cannabis Media.
And I'm Kurt Dalton, the founder of Cannabis.net.
Every week, Kurt and I get together to review some of the biggest stories in the cannabis industry. He and I talk about them. We have a few comments, and then we get reports from Canada, New York, and Washington, D.C.
And this week's no different, Jimmy. We finally have Vermont moving toward recreational cannabis with retail opening in their state. We have an old state and a new state, Colorado and Illinois, both setting cannabis sales records in July, as well as multiple efforts to legalize the cannabis plant in America, including our friend Steve D'Angelo getting involved.
But first, let's go to Deborah Borchardt in New York to check on the financial weed scene. Deborah?
Thanks, Kurt. Thanks, Jimmy. Well, things seem to keep going the wrong way for Charlotte's Web. This week, the CBD company reported that their revenue fell from $25 million in the 2019 second quarter to $21.6 million for the 2020 second quarter. The company also delivered a net loss of $14 million for the quarter versus last year's net income of $2.2 million. Fire and Flower delivered second quarter revenue of $28.6 million. Unfortunately, they also reported a net loss of $29.1 million. Trulieve is stepping out of Florida and into Pennsylvania. They're buying PurePen and Pioneer Leasing and Consulting, as well as dispensary operator Keystone Relief Centers. Trulieve agreed to acquire PurePen for an upfront payment of $46 million. And that's the big news this week. I'm Deborah Borchardt from the Green Market Report for Weed Talk News.
Here's something that is newsworthy and very disturbing for the cannabis industry. Twitter is getting in bed with the Fed's substance abuse initiative. Now, when you go on Twitter and you search cannabis or marijuana, immediately you get a notice from the Substance Abuse and Mental Health Services Administration. It says, if you know someone who's struggling with substance abuse, you are not alone. Then there's a link to that Federal Health Services Administration. Cannabis advocates are upset because there is no such link when you search alcohol or vodka, for instance. The point is, again, there actually is a way to use cannabis responsibly, and not everyone who uses weed needs substance abuse assistance. Kurt, here we go again.
Hold on, Jimmy. Twitter, let's search for big breasts. Oh, I'm sorry. Are we supposed to show ads and pictures now and tell us we have problems? When is Twitter a platform to decide that if you're searching for cannabis, which is legal in, again, 33 states, some territories becoming legal, that you should see an abuse ad? That is ridiculous. And I agree with the cannabis people that under no circumstance should Twitter have that discretionary decision-making on a word like cannabis or marijuana.
You know, the federal government has been funding substance abuse studies for decades about cannabis, and they're still looking for a connection, and they just can't find it. So just in case you didn't know, that same federal administrative group is calling for a rule change on drug testing for federal employees. That group wants to test hair follicles for remnants of drug use. Now, in the past, testing hair follicles has been deemed unreliable because remnants can last on or in your hair follicles for months after you stop using it. This is especially true if your hair happens to be darker because you are a member of the Black or Hispanic communities. Kurt, here's another example of what they call systematic racism in our federal government.
Absolutely, and it's completely unnecessary. If you take out the part about darker hair, why are you testing someone that I think hair follicle is up to 90 days? Why would you care if they used cannabis 2.5 months ago if they're interviewing for a job or doing some sort of service that would require like driving a bus or a large vehicle? So again, there's just no basis. Everyone seems to be going in the correct direction except these small anti-pot groups that make headlines for these outrageous, relatively stupid things they want to do.
Exactly. And you know, there are a few initiatives that are ongoing to make cannabis federally legal, and we just found out that the U.S. House of Representatives that was supposed to vote on the MORE Act before the end of September has now pushed that off until after the election, which really makes sense because, let's face it, anything that the House does, the Senate is going to say no to. Now, there's another branch of the government that perhaps those who are using the federal laws to perhaps motivate them to get rid of those federal laws, and who else but Steve DeAngelo is leading that fight. The Last Prisoner Project has filed an amicus brief in Washington versus Barr, as in William Barr, the Attorney General. It's a landmark lawsuit challenging the fact of that legality of the federal law that keeps cannabis. In this brief, it says, quote, "Our country's federal marijuana policy needlessly entangles millions of people in the criminal legal system at a tremendous societal cost. We also know that the unjust burden of these misguided policies disproportionately falls on the most vulnerable segments of our society." So, Kurt, can the Constitution be the key to getting cannabis descheduled and maybe even legalized federally?
It has until this point. They've tried different challenges along this line, all the way from medicinal purposes and the right to medicine and challenging. And basically the federal judge kicks it back out and says, it's not that I don't agree with you, but this is not the court to hear this type of motion, and just kind of gets dragged out and delayed. Now, Steve has been through this process with the U.S. government for over 30 years. So I salute him, and he's a friend of the show, and I hope you can't fire enough cannons at this subject. So whether it's through voting, whether it's through politicians making a law, or even if it's Steve or someone like him filing a lawsuit that changes it on a ruling, let's try it, and let's support Steve, and I hope it's successful, obviously.
In the meantime, there's other news coming out of Washington, D.C., so let's go down to the Vote Pro podcast's own Phil Adams for the D.C. Report. Phil?
Hi, I'm Phil Adams from Vote Pro Podcasts, and this is the Weed Talk News D.C. Report. 7 members of Congress, along with several pro-cannabis advocacy groups, have asked the U.S. Supreme Court to hear a lawsuit against the Drug Enforcement Agency. Lawmakers filed an amicus brief in support of the suit, originally brought in 2017 by a coalition of medical marijuana patients and pro-legalization activists. The brief reads in part, quote, "This court must take action to remedy the unconstitutional system that has unfairly burdened petitioners and similarly situated patients who lawfully use medical marijuana. The Supreme Court justices will decide next month whether to grant a hearing." The House of Representatives will not be voting on a bill to legalize cannabis next week as planned. House Majority Leader Steny Hoyer of Maryland said on Thursday that a floor vote on the Marijuana Opportunity, Reinvestment, and Expungement Act, scheduled for next week, will be postponed until after the election. Hoyer explained that passing a continuing resolution and a COVID-19 relief bill were the more pressing issues. In the meantime, California Representative Barbara Lee, co-chair of the Congressional Cannabis Caucus, said a delay on the MORE Act vote could be used to get more House members on board. Senate Minority Leader Chuck Schumer says if you want to see marijuana legalized, you need to vote Democratic. In an interview with Leafly, Schumer said the differences between the two parties are like night and day, and that Majority Leader Mitch McConnell will scuttle any attempt to bring a legalization bill to the Senate floor. While McConnell has stated in the past that he would not support marijuana legalization, he was instrumental in passing the 2018 Farm Bill that federally legalized hemp, the non-intoxicating form of cannabis. That's the Weed Talk News DC report for this week. I'm Phil Adams from Vote Pro Podcast.
Believe it or not, Iowa is another state out there that is going to ask the DEA to make an exception to the federal drug laws before the end of the year. Why Iowa, you ask? Well, they are worried about their federal cash flow, and it might just be taken away because in that state, they have medical marijuana there, and yes, they allow school children to take their medicine in school. Sure enough, when that happened in Maine, the feds revoked $3 million from vacation land. So, Kurt, is the injustice about cannabis as a Schedule I drug ever going to change?
Let's see, how many weeks till voting day? This administration is certainly not a friend of the plant, and you saw what happened in Maine, which is bordered on ridiculous. So they're trying it again, and Iowa's trying to preempt a federal movement if they do the same type of legalization for kids, especially with medicine. So it's a shame that states have to do this, but until there's an election and a possible change in government, this is what you have to do to get medicine to your kids, all natural plant medicine.
It's incredible to me that we're still fighting this, but there's a lot of things that are incredible to me. In the meantime, Vermont, a state where you can possess cannabis legally, is getting closer to setting up their adult use retail market. The House of Representatives in Vermont has passed that legalization bill, and now, ready for this, it's going on to their Senate. But in that Senate, they're expected to pass it and send it up to the governor, Phil Scott, perhaps by the end of this month. Kurt, that's good news for everybody in Vermont who's really, there aren't that many people in Vermont, but they're all pretty cool, nice, laid-back people, you know.
The irony is the home state of Bernie Sanders, Ben & Jerry's, and Fish do not have recreational cannabis. But I would be remiss, because we're heading north, if we didn't get our good friend Solomon Israel from Marijuana Business Daily to give us his Canadian report on the cannabis scene. Solomon, take it away.
I'm Solomon Israel from Marijuana Business Daily International, and this is the Weed Talk News Canadian Cannabis Report. Aurora Cannabis is warning investors to inspect big write-downs when it reports earnings next week. The producer expects to post impairment charges of up to 1.8 billion Canadian dollars. Aurora also announced its new CEO last week. Miguel Martin is the former CEO of Reliva and joined Aurora when it acquired that company earlier this year. Executive shakeups are also in the cards at Hexo Corporation. This week, the Canadian firm appointed its fourth chief financial officer in 2 years. Hexo posted a net loss of 19.5 million Canadian dollars last quarter. And Canadian cannabis events firm Lyft has filed for bankruptcy after failing to raise enough money to repay its debt holders this month. Despite the bankruptcy, Lyft's virtual expo is scheduled to take place in November. You can read all those stories and more at mjbizdaily.com. I'm Solomon Israel for Marijuana Business Daily.
A few final notes from the states. New Jersey is opening up another medical dispensary and now has 11 operational in that state. 2 other states, in the meantime, set monthly sales records for the month of July. First-year state, Illinois, topped $63 million in sales in 1 month. And in Colorado, they passed the $200 million mark in sales in the month of July. Oh, and Kurt, guess who is setting up a dispensary in downtown Chicago? MedMen, expanding to 2,000 square feet. Is that enough room for social distancing and weed?
In downtown Chicago, it's called the Miracle Mile. But what a great job Governor Pritzker's done in Illinois' rollout to get this moving, to get those kind of sales numbers and tax revenue, which Illinois needs. They're a third world country dead at this point. But look at the difference between Vermont, Maine, and even our home state, Massachusetts, with the slow rollout. Maine voted on recreational 2.5 years ago. They approved it. They're about to open their first shop. So kudos to progressive governors who see this as not only a healing and helpful product, but also for the tax revenue.
I think the word now is essential. And speaking of essential, did you know that college students are actually using this COVID thing as a gap year? And what are they doing during that gap year? they're applying for jobs in the cannabis industry, or they're actually going to school to study cannabis. Oaksterdam College in California, enrollment is up. And I suppose that comes as no surprise because jobs are available in the cannabis industry that continues to expand. So, Kurt, I guess you go to school now and then you come back and you teach your buddies about how to roll a joint the right way, I guess. Or
wait. College students are really interested in weed. That should be the lead. That is a headline. Wow. Let's get that one rolling. So obviously it's nice to see them putting it a little bit into education and say, hey, maybe I can make some money in this industry, whether it's growing or marketing or learning about how the plant works or extraction. That's obviously a plus. And people are seeing what sells. Where the job's going to be when this ends or continues is cannabis sells. MedMen's opening. I don't know where they're getting the money. The terms of their $20 million loan were ridiculous. So they have to hire people for grows and for retail. So good for the college kids to not only smoke it, but to study it.
There you go. Hey, it's all about education and science anyway. And that'll do it for this week's Weed Talk News. I'm Jimmy Young from Pro Cannabis Media.
And I'm Kurt Dalton with Cannabis.net.
Remember, it's a whole new world of weed out there. Use it responsibly. Thanks for watching. Thanks for listening. Weed Talk Now, Weed Talk News, and In the Weeds are all available on most major podcast distributors like iTunes, Spotify, Google Play, and our friends at clnsmedia.com and our flagship, Cannabis.net. So subscribe, share, and like our videos on all the social media networks out there, including LinkedIn, Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, the WeedTube, and YouTube. Weed Talk and In the Weeds are two productions of Pro Cannabis Media supported by Revolutionary Clinics, one of the top medical cannabis dispensaries in the Massachusetts area, now with 3 locations in Greater Boston, 2 in Cambridge and 1 on Broadway in Somerville. Rev Clinics has a patient-first mission. They will customize your needs as a medical patient with the proper titration and combination of strains, flavors, and products. Rev Clinics, where the patient comes first.
We are Pro Cannabis Media.